All right, so today we're cracking open a book called The Master Playbook by Robert Ziehe, and this book, it makes a pretty big claim that it's laying out the hidden systems that are really shaping our world.
So let me ask you this. Do you ever get that feeling that something's just off? Like you're watching the news, scrolling through social media, and it all feels so chaotic, but there's this little voice in your head saying, hmm, this can't all be random, can it? Well, the book kicks off right there with that exact feeling. And that feeling leads us straight to the core idea of the entire book. The author, Robert Ziehe, puts it this way. Most people notice the pieces, but never the board. He's basically saying we're all trained to focus on the individual game pieces. A scandal over here, a crisis over there, but we're completely missing the larger strategy, the game being played on the whole board. Okay, so in this explainer, we're going to lay out that central argument. The book's big claim is that all these things we see as separate issues, finance, media, even public health, they're not just isolated problems. No, the author argues they're all part of a single, coordinated playbook. So how does this supposed power work? Well, the book's theory is pretty interesting. It says that real power doesn't have to hide in the shadows. Instead, it just blends into everyday life. It builds systems that seem totally normal, totally logical. And what most of us would just shrug off as a coincidence, the author says is actually carefully planned coordination. So to make this case, the book breaks this playbook down into 5 key areas, 5 domains that it claims are used to manipulate and shape our civilization. We're talking about our minds, our sense of time, our bodies, our resources, and even our concept of reality itself. So let's start with the first one, the mind. Right. So first up is what the book calls the software of control. This is all about how our thoughts, our perceptions are programmed. The argument is that before you ever use force, you start with language. You control the way people think. The term he coins for this is language engineering, and the idea is really simple but powerful. Before you do something controversial, you just rewrite the words around it. You change the labels to make it sound better, more acceptable. Because if you can change the label, you can change how people feel about what they're seeing. And here's a perfect example of what he means. The book argues that when you switch from a phrase like killing civilians to collateral damage, you're not just playing with words. You're actually building a tool to get rid of moral pushback. I mean, enhanced interrogation sounds like a sterile technical procedure, right? But torture, that word demands a moral reaction. The author is saying this is a deliberate, strategic reframing. And here's where it gets really 21st century. The book claims this whole process has now gone digital, and it's happening at an industrial scale. It's not just memos and press releases anymore. Now you have algorithms on social media platforms doing this work silently. They control what you see and what you don't through ranking, through moderation, what the book calls soft rail systems for attention. Okay, so we've talked about the software. Now let's get into the hardware. This part of the book is all about the more tangible, physical forms of control, the things that literally bind a person. And this quote from Z really nails the argument. Today, the chains are invisible, made of contracts, credit scores, and digital entries. Servitude looks like opportunity. The whole point here is that modern control isn't about physical chains anymore. It's about obligation. It's debt, it's contracts, it's digital scores, and it's all packaged to look like an opportunity, a way to get ahead. And to back this up, the book points to numbers that are just staggering. Take this one. Over $1 trillion in student debt in the US alone. The author presents this not just as a financial crisis, but as a tool to create a population that's predictable, compliant, and frankly, too buried in debt to ever risk rocking the boat. All right, moving on. The next piece of the puzzle, according to the book, is how our very perception of reality and even time itself is engineered. And the main way it claims this is done, through the constant management of crisis and fear. The book's thesis here is simple and chilling. Nothing gets a population organized and compliant like fear. Ziehe argues that the way we're governed today depends on a never-ending cycle of emergencies, whether it's terrorism, pandemics, climate change. The claim is that an atmosphere of perpetual crisis is kept alive to justify more and more control. And this is the cycle the book claims is used over and over again. It starts with a trigger, some threat, real or maybe a little exaggerated. Then the media machine kicks in, amplifying the fear until it's way bigger than the actual risk. Step 3, the authorities swoop in with temporary emergency measures. and we adapt, right? The new restrictions just become normal. But here's the kicker, the most important step according to the book. Step 5. That control system, it never really goes away. It just sits there, waiting for the next trigger. So, all of this leads to what is basically the climax of the book's argument. It's where all these different forms of control, the language, the debt, the fear, all converge into one single ultimate system, what the author calls a digital panopticon. And the book makes a really key distinction here. It says the goal of all this modern surveillance isn't just to watch you or catch you doing something wrong. No, the real goal is to collect so much data on you from every click, every purchase, every location ping, that they can build models to predict your behavior. And not just predict it, but get ahead of it, to preempt it. So how do you preempt behavior? The book says the main tool is something called social scoring. And we're not just talking about your credit score here. This is a much bigger idea. It's a system where basically everything you do online and off is tracked and assigned a score. And that score determines your access to, well, pretty much everything. Services, travel, loans, you name it. Now, this is where the book draws a really fascinating parallel. It compares the very obvious state-run social credit system in China with what's happening in the West. And the argument is that while China's system is overt, everyone knows about it, the West is quietly building a similar system, only it's driven by corporations. So instead of one big government score, you have dozens of smaller, hidden scores from credit bureaus, insurance companies, data brokers that are all fragmented, but when linked together, achieve almost the same result. Okay, so after painting this pretty bleak picture of a master playbook, you might expect the author to call for some big revolution, right? But he doesn't. Instead, the book pivots to what it calls the counter playbook, and it's all about individual awareness and mental resistance. And the solutions offered are not these huge, impossible tasks. They are small, practical habits you can build. Things like actually naming the act, using precise words like censorship instead of corporate speak like user safety. Constantly asking who benefits from this story. Evaluating the argument, not the person making it. And this is a big one, just slowing down. Forcing a delay before you react to those things online that are designed to trigger you. And finally, trying to reduce your data footprint, to become just a little more unpredictable to the algorithms. And it all boils down to this one powerful idea from the book: awareness is the one thing it cannot predict. Think about it. The entire system of prediction and control that Ziehe describes, it relies on us acting like robots, just following predictable patterns without thinking. The second you become consciously aware of the game being played, you break the model. You become unpredictable. And so that's where the book leaves us, with a final, really provocative question. It doesn't give you the answer, it just puts it out there for you to think about. If awareness is the one thing this whole system can't predict, what happens when you start paying attention?